Alright, well I'm out at the field today. I finally got all the electronics mounted up on this thing. I've got my motor ready to rotate from vertical flight to horizontal flight. So we'll be testing those two different flight regimes out today, hopefully. It's a little bit breezy, so it might make it hard to do the hovering test. But I'm very interested to see how it's going to do in the forward flight configuration, because it's got this big canard on the nose, and I'm a little concerned it's going to be tugging it up and down too much. Okay, so those were some good little test flights. I didn't get very high, but I did get a lot of data on that. And basically I found out that the motor has plenty of power to lift the aircraft into the air, and the control issues are working. So when these batteries here slide forward and backwards and side to side, that helps in my roll and my pitch control in the hovering mode, and that does work. The only problem is once the plane gets a little bit too far over, it just tilts over and that's it, it's all over. Now those little hovering flights you saw, those were not gyro stabilized. There's no gyros on this plane. And that testing basically proved that I do need to put some gyros on. So that's going to be the next step. Going to put some gyros on for these servos here, the ones that control the weight movement, the weight shifting batteries. The other thing I need to do is actually move the weight lower down. So these batteries here are pretty much at the same level as where the center of effort is from the motor, and that needs to change. They need to go lower, and that way once the plane gets a little cockeyed, it's going to have that inherent stability where it wants to self-right itself. So after we do some flights today in the forward flight configuration, I will be making a modification to this plane and moving the batteries farther down. Now, one of the very crucial things I had to keep in mind when I was designing this plane is to make sure that the motor and propellers, when they're in the vertical orientation, is exactly where the center of gravity is for the plane when it's in its forward flight. So I did testing as best I could with no electronics on it to, just doing some glide testing with this nose canard on here to see where the center of gravity would be, or the center of lift, so that I could balance the plane properly. And I made sure that where this axis is, this rotating point for the motors, is right directly in line with that CG. So hopefully that's going to enable me to have a balanced plane in forward flight, and then once I flip this switch and this goes into hovering mode, it's going to be pulling that plane up right on the CG. So that way the weight of the batteries is perfectly balanced for forward flight as well as hovering and vertical flight. Okay, so here we go. We're all ready. Everything's hooked up. Motors and everything. Now this is a little difficult of a plane to launch because there's no good place to hold on to it underneath the airframe. So what I'm going to do is grab it right here and give it a toss sort of straight up in the air almost, and hopefully we can launch it like that. Alright, she's flying. Whoa! Very pitchy, very pitchy. I'm not surprised. Woo! Wow, okay, that was really interesting. So, plenty of pitch control, really too much. You saw it do a backflip at the end there. So what I've done is I went ahead and unhooked the servo that actually controls that front movable canard. And so hopefully that's going to make the plane not so pitchy. I think this elevator's got tons of authority, especially once the propellers are spinning and giving it a little bit of prop wash over that elevator. So here we go again. We've unhooked the nose canard servo, so that's not moving anymore. We just have that elevator shifting battery weight up front, and ailerons moving with the shifting battery weight there too. Oh yeah! Whoa! Oh, pull out, pull out! Okay, well that's better. Still not ideal. I think my nose canard is shifted. It didn't stay in a locked position, so it's really fighting hard to push that nose down, and I'm giving a bit of up elevator. Uh-oh, that's not good. Uh-oh, a little crash there. Well, the good news is the damage really isn't too bad. It's foam board, so it's very easily repairable. Pretty much all that happens was the barbecue skewers here that hold the nose of the plane upright. Those broke and bent over, but all the servos still work. I tested everything out. All the control surfaces still work. Especially these Metal Gear servos that are running all the heavyweight stuff, like rotating this motor setup here and moving the batteries fore and aft and side to side. So very cool. All the electronics held up really well. Now I'm 90% sure what happened is that when I took off, this nose canard was at an angle, and as soon as it hit some wind, all I had done is unplug the servo, so it had no control. It wasn't trying to hold this canard at any angle. So as soon as the wind hit it, it really wanted to push that thing down, and that gave it a lot of nose down tendency, so I was having to hold some up elevator on there, and just got into a dive and there was no way to pull out. But aside from that, it was actually flying fairly well, very similar to how the regular FPV plane flew, which is what this plane's modeled after. So the testing's looking pretty good here. The plane does want to hover, the battery shifting around does want to control, keeping that hover stable, and then when it's in a forward flight mode, it does want to fly like a regular plane. The only thing I got to do is make sure that this nose canard stays at a fixed angle. So I'm going to make these repairs, move these batteries down so they're lower, so that makes the plane more stable, put some gyros on. That's going to be the next step in trying to make this plane that takes off and lands vertically while also having good forward flight characteristics.